Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Cabinet on Friday, the 11th of April. And I'll get us started. So, the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Leader. I can offer apologies for absence this morning from the Partnerships Portfolio Holder, Councillor Gina Placey, and also from the Leader of the Reform UK Group, Councillor Jeff Bray. His Deputy Councillor Peter Harris is attending in his stead this morning. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Okay, so next agenda item is minutes of the last meeting. I'm happy to move them as a true and correct copy. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second, Leader.
And are we all agreed that they're a true copy? Thank you very much. I'll sign down as we go. Number 3 is declarations of interest. Have we got any declarations of interest? No? Okay, excellent. Announcements by the Leader of the Council. Well, today I have none. It's been a very long week and we were in Southend yesterday doing meetings with LGR. So that's about as far as my announcements will go, I guess. Number 5 is announcements by Cabinet members. I don't believe we've got any. No, in that case we're going to go to number 6, which is matters referred to the Cabinet by the Council, and in this case there are none. Then I'll go to number 7, matters referred to the Cabinet by a committee. Once again, there are none. Leader of the Council's items, and there are none on this occasion, which takes me straight to number 9, which is the report of the Assets and Community Safety Portfolio Holder, and I believe this one is Councillor Peter Cox.
Thank you, Leader. This report presents the Crime and Disorder Reduction Strategy for the years 2025 to 2028. The strategy sets out the overarching framework for tendering District Council and its partners in the Community Safety Partnership to reduce crime and disorder by formalising work that will be undertaken with the CSP and the Council's Community Safety Team over the next 3 years. The strategy sets out our priorities for reducing crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour whilst protecting vulnerable people across tendering. In collaboration with our partners, Tendering District Council has produced a comprehensive strategic assessment for 2024 to 2025. The purpose of the assessment is to understand the trends, patterns and drivers relating to crime and antisocial behaviour so the partnership can set clear priorities, develop intelligence-led activity and deploy resources effectively. The strategy is being informed primarily by the strategic assessment, which is at pages 53 to 93 of the agenda. The strategy is based upon a wide range of data and information about crime and disorder and from public consultation. Information about crime and disorder and from public consultation is brought together to create our annual assessment. There are 4 priorities within the strategy: tackling antisocial behaviour and the root causes of ASB, including hate crime; high harm with emphasis on domestic abuse and violence against women and girls; drug and knife enabled serious violence; emerging threats and trends, i.e. shoplifting, vehicle crime, arson and criminal damage. Using the assessment, 4 key themes have been identified within the strategy. Firstly, tackling violence against women and girls is at the forefront of the CSP's agenda. Secondly, our ambition is to increase support for victims and survivors, increase the numbers of perpetrators brought to justice and reduce the prevalence of violence against women and girls. Thirdly, we will work in partnership across the CSP and Health and Wellbeing Board and with our partners and communities to achieve progress during the lifetime of this strategy and seek to bring about real change for residents and visitors to tendering. Lastly, the CSP brings the opportunity for organisations and groups to come together to improve crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour in tendering and create an environment where people and communities can flourish. The CSP remains committed to making tendering safe. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Leanne Thornton and her team for the work they've done in producing the Crime and Disorder Reduction Strategy and for its clarity. The strategy was considered by the Community Leadership Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 28th of January this year, and my response to their recommendations is laid before the Cabinet this morning at page 28. I'd now like to remove the recommendations set out on page 26 of the agenda, and specifically that Cabinet improves the Crime and Disorder Reduction Strategy 2025 to 2028 as set out in Appendix A, in accordance with Section 6 of the Crime and Disorder Act 1998 for recommendation onto full council for adoption as part of the council's policy framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Do you have a seconder, please? Councillor Henderson.
Yes, Leader. I'm pleased to second this report. It's an excellent report, and it actually gives me an opportunity, because when you look at one part of the report, it says about, and I'm glad it's mentioned as number one part of the number one priorities is hate crime up by 10%. And if you look on page 13, it says education and communication, engage with primary schools and secondary schools, offering hate crime educational resources. And it gives me a chance to actually promote a fantastic event which happened about 2 weeks ago in Harwich, where all the primary schools came together and organised an inclusion and diversity festival. And those children actually designed a diversity bench, which has now been put in place with the support of Tendring District Council on the seafront on Dovercourt. And the bench was actually designed by school children themselves. And I'm pleased to say one of the local artists who was part of the designing and creating the bench was an artist from Clacton called Kaylee Reid. So it's something that we should be proud of, not only the schools involved. I can tell you there was 10 different venues throughout Dovercourt at that time, sharing those opportunities, and a number of organisation companies who contributed with donations and support, which one was Galloper, Holtman Carlos, which is a business in Harwich, and also the funding actually came from ALSEP, the local cultural education partnership, which was part of the Shared Prosperity Fund as well. So we can actually say we had a hand in that, and very successful, showing young people the differences amongst our different cultures. And I can tell you, some of the venues, one was Bollywood dance and the other was samba drumming, and then there was tasting Japanese food. So there was a real good mix of cultures, and teaching young people that we should be more tolerant and acceptable to different cultures around the district and around the country. I hope this is a good example that we can share across the whole of Tendring with all the schools to bring together those really important aspects of making sure that young people at an early age understand that diversity and inclusion of anyone, including whether you've got disability, whether you're different culture, whether you're different religion. I just think that's an excellent cause, and that goes some way towards some of this crime disorder policy and report. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Henderson. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Opening up the floor. Is there any questions or comments? Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Leader. Obviously, contained within this report, there will be things of concern to the general public. You know, violence against a person up 10.4%, shoplifting up 17%. Some may say, well, there's no wonder that that's actually happening because of the inability of prosecutions if there's still anything under £200. Possession of weapons up 21.2% is concerning. And very often, I would welcome any reduction in price and reduction in crime, and there are some other reductions there as well. But it is very often the fear of crime that is the prominent factor amongst residents, and it can very much dictate what people view of our district is. The environmental antisocial behaviour up 29.1%. Are we specifically talking about fly tipping and potentially that seems to be on the increase? Is there any correlation there between the change in policy with the Essex County Council run tips there? You'd be interested to know what the thought process is there. And what I would like to see is more police on the beat. And now this is not a decision for the Cabinet, but one of the things which I think is, very, very questionable is the amount that Essex Police spend on DEI posts. And they spend, through Freedom of Information, £614,000 per year on DEI posts. Surely that would be better spent on police officers in Clacton. No further points. Thank you.
I was going to say, you've just wandered into county territory, and as you will. If that does affect us, but this is a TDC cabinet. I'll come to you, Councillor Honeywood, in a second. To answer a couple of the questions around the environmental increase, actually it's partly to do with the work that Councillor Smith has done with the litter picking group, is that we've had a rise in reporting of fly tipping, whereas before we had situations where litter picking groups were using their litter picking to clear up fly tipping as well. So we now have a better understanding of where the problems are and that sort of thing. I must admit I missed a couple of bits and pieces, so I don't know if Councillor Cott wants to come in.
I think the important thing, Councillor Harris, is we actually adopt the strategy. We haven't had one. Now we've got one. We can use all the partnerships across the CSP and the wider public to engage, and we can actually start measuring things in a proper way to actually see if the strategies that we've picked out are actually successful. And I think that's the important thing. I think the point that you make about the fear of crime is an issue where we have to engage the public. We have to be engaged with the public to actually make sure that A, they're able to report properly, B, that those crimes are actually followed up in the way that they should be, and C, that helps eventually to dissipate that fear of crime. And I think that, and in terms of, I agree with you, there should be more policemen visible. And I think the government has recently announced that there will be named neighbourhood policemen in every neighbourhood around the country. So I think that's something that we look forward to seeing. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Honeywood.
It's just a point. Now that Essex County Council's been mentioned, do we need to declare an interest?
I don't think we need to declare an interest. I think I was just pointing out they would wander into their territory rather than anything that's beholden to them.
Better safe than sorry.
Absolutely. Councillor Harris, you wanted to come back.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Obviously, fear of crime amongst residents, that is an important issue that we give reassurance to them. But what I would also like to see is reassurance to businesses as well. Having a local sort of beat officers is very important, but shoplifting is a real issue. Most businesses now, that I speak to, don't even bother reporting it now, because of the lack of assistance that they feel that they're going to get. So I think that, communicating with businesses would be an important thing, even more so than we currently do. Thank you.
Absolutely, but I just want to be clear. When I say questions and comments, I'm not looking for debate around things. So, Councillor Cox.
I'll take the comment with a will you prefix to it. I think I'm quite happy to take those comments forward to the Community Safety Partnership and actually think about how we can better engage with businesses, specifically for the points you make.
Are there any other questions? No? Okay. It's been moved by Councillor Cott, seconded by Councillor Henson. Are we happy to approve the recommendations on page 26? Thank you very much. In that case, I'll move us on to agenda item number 10, which is a report the assets and community safety portfolio holder, the freehold disposal of redundant office site at Wheelie. And I believe this is you again, Councillor Cox.
Thank you. Cabinet is asked to consider whether the Council should continue negotiating an option agreement for the disposal of the redundant council office at Wheelie. This follows a decision made on the 17th of December 2021 by the previous administration to dispose of the site, with heads of terms agreed on the 25th of April 2023. This was following a closed bidding process exclusive to 2 special purchasers. Despite considerable work by both legal and property teams, negotiations have currently stalled because of differing legal opinions in respect of highway rights adjoining the site. This is a situation that is not easily resolved without Tendron District Council underwriting the proposed development, which is not feasible. Ongoing costs for the site are in the region of £65,000 per year. Given the delays, costs and associated risks, Cabinet is recommended to stop pursuing current negotiations with the existing bidder and explore alternative disposal options. These alternatives could include open market tender, demolition, auction or redevelopment for social housing. There have been approaches by two separate parties in the past few months with proposals for the site, one including the retention of the building for local community interest as well as securing a legacy for the local area. There has also been previous interest from other companies subsequent to the current heads of terms being agreed. If Cabinet agrees the recommendations set out on pages 95 and 96, a further report will be presented within 3 months outlining alternative options for the site at Wheelie for consideration. I ask Cabinet to agree to recommendations as set out on pages 95 and 96.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Baker.
Chairman, I'm quite happy to second. I think Councillor Cox has sort of covered everything. If we've reached a stalemate, then I'm of the opinion that we need to look at further options, and this report gives us that. So I fully support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Are there any questions? We'll go with Councillor Honeywood first this time.
First, I've not much to say because it was raised at the scrutiny pre-meeting the other night, and I think on Monday evening or next Monday evening it's one of the issues being raised by that committee, so I haven't much to say really, except there was one thing reading it, and it's I think more of a clarification really. Is a decision needed to overturn the previous decision? Because it doesn't seem to have one in there.
I'm going to go to Ms Hastings for that one.
Thank you, Councillor Honeywood. The report as written and the recommendations that are before Cabinet today do not undo the previous decision. I think it's fair to say that the existing decision would remain on the table, as it were, and would probably still be brought back to Cabinet as one of the options. But at this point in time, the previous decision still stands.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Leader. And I suppose I should declare an interest in this one as I am the ward councillor for Wheelie and Tendring. And this is a building which I travel past every single day and has been of great concern to me for an awful long time. I am very pleased to see that the Leader and the Cabinet here are actually, taking action on this, and we appear to be moving forward. So I'm not going to pass too many comments at this stage, other than, for various different reasons, environmental reasons, for historical reasons, I would like to see this building kept intact and something done with that. And I think that, ratepayers deserve to get this matter dealt with as quickly as possible. It's costing £5,500 a month as a minimum in terms of costs. And suppose the question will be, how long do we envisage before a final decision will be made on the future of Wheelie in the interests of our ratepayers? Thank you.
Councillor Cox.
Chair, the report says that the report will come back to Cabinet within 3 months. Obviously, that report would give some indication about how long that following obviously that report will have against the options within that report the possible time scale for each of those options.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Cox, seconded by Councillor Baker. Are we in agreement? Thank you very much. Okay, agenda item number 11 is mine. It's the annual capital and treasury strategy for 25-26, including prudential and treasury indicators. And as per usual, I'll just read out some comments. As mentioned last year, events elsewhere in the country where councils have got themselves into financial difficulties highlights how important our policies and processes are around capital investment and treasury activities. The financial challenges for the sector have not gone away, and a number of councils have had to apply for exceptional financial support from the government to enable them to set balanced budgets in 25-26. Such financial support comes with disadvantages, as it is not direct grant funding, but instead it allows councils to borrow money to fund revenue expenditure, which in many ways increases the problem as more debt is taken on that has to be paid back at some point in the future. Financial stability is therefore doubly important, as if councils start to get things wrong, things can unravel very quickly and downward spirals can be difficult to get out of. We all therefore need to continue with a fairly good grasp of the various issues and responsibilities set out within the strategy we are considering today. That in turn helps us to all gain the necessary assurance that our money continues to be managed effectively and within a risk-averse approach. Although the report sets out a slight change to the timing of consultation with the Resource and Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I welcome their thoughts and comments which we can pick up during the 25-26 as necessary. We are not proposing any major changes to our strategy in 25-26 with our existing sound approach continuing. However, we continue to learn from previous spending and investment decisions, especially those associated with major capital projects. We received a report on the successful Orwell Place project earlier in the year, and we have a post-project review of the Sunspot project next on the agenda today. Such reviews that also include the Spendles Place project, as I said, that was reported to a recent audit committee meeting, form an important element of the capital investment decision-making cycle. Outcomes from these reviews are proposed to be brought together as part of our annual review of governance that will take place over the next couple of months, that will in turn feed into our annual governance statement activities that myself and the Chief Executive are required to sign off as part of our commitment to delivering any associated actions. Some councils might find it hard to take such an approach, especially where the outcomes are reported publicly, but this reflects our ongoing commitment to be as open and transparent as possible, which I think provides better learning opportunities and engagement with all members. Following our discussions around devolution and local government reorganisation at our last full council meeting, our day-to-day decision-making processes will now start to capture their potential impacts. Although relatively limited at this stage, the strategy now recognises their importance within our underlying decision-making processes. All of what I have talked about is brought into even sharper focus with the context of the various levelling up and CRP projects that are underway, along with the expertise, knowledge and capacity that the establishment of our project delivery unit brings to the council. By continuing to do the right things underpinned by our capital and treasury strategy and our financial forecast approach, we should see us successfully delivering a range of important projects over the district over the next few years. So those are my comments. It was easier for me to write than read, I think. So I do need a seconder, however. Councillor Barry.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm happy to endorse and second this report and the recommendations therein. Your introduction, you know, the clear message that's coming across is that we must continue with our good financial management, which has stood us in good stead over many years. As you've said, we operate an open and transparent system of reviewing outcomes, highlighting both positive and negative learning points. We're in a position where we can continue to deliver a range of projects over the next few years, from levelling up and community regeneration schemes to replacing the aging boilers at the Clacton Leisure Centre. I think our strategic approach and continued application of best practice puts us in a strong position in terms of securing government funding, and we continue, I think, to be seen as a trusted delivery partner and a can-do council. So I'm really happy to endorse this report and second the recommendations. I'll second the report and endorse the recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Barry. Mr. Davidson.
Just very quickly, I just want to say that part of the income of the council, obviously, in terms of the treasury management, how we manage it, is really important. And we've been very good at reflecting what the income rates are and the percentages, and have made good, prudential, safe investments in that. And obviously our treasury management have assisted the council and supported the council in the delivery of its priorities. So it's a really important piece of our financial stability there. And as Mr. Barrett and I often discuss, is around the importance of how well we do at that.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions? Okay, in that case, it's been moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Barry. Recommendations are on page 102. Are we happy to move them? Thank you very much. So, number 12 on the agenda is the report of the Economic Growth, Regeneration and Tourism Portfolio Holder, and this is the Sunspot Workplace, Jaywick Sands post-project review. Over to you, Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Leader, and I'm very pleased to present this report on a remarkable achievements and progress of an award-winning building project, the Sunspot Business Units and Marketplace. This initiative has garnered significant recognition, including the National Planning Award for Brownfield Regeneration and the Institute of Economic Development Award for Social Value Champion of the Year 2024. Additionally, we have been highly commended in various prestigious awards such as the MJ Awards for Delivering Sustainability and Social Value Champion 2024, and the McEwen Award for Architecture, as well as being a finalist in the Local Government Chronicle Award for Future Places and ADEPT's President's Award for delivering sustainable growth, within the winners being announced over the next couple of months, which we keep our fingers crossed we may come forward with other awards. Our efforts have also been acknowledged by the Royal Institute of Architects. Since the report was sent through last week, we have successfully rented the last unit, bringing us to 100% occupancy with 24 units rented and the cafe. Despite initial challenges in hiring out the meeting room and event space, our advertising efforts in Look magazines have resulted in recent steady bookings. The building, which opened in September 2023, is currently in its final stages of snagging period, which is expected to be signed off in the next couple of weeks. While we face significant challenges due to contamination on the site, which added significant pressure to the budget, with approximately $760,000 spent on its removal, we have ensured that the environment is safe for our residents. We are currently negotiating the final account for the snagging to be signed off, with outstanding costs of £6,000 for the communal kitchen and £121,000 for retention. We have £31,000 in the capital budget, and so are requesting an additional £100,000 to cover the final account. I'm proud to report that all project objectives have been achieved. We have provided affordable space for start up and grow on businesses and generated employment opportunities for Jaywick residents. The cafe offers affordable, healthy, fresh food and produce, including free children's meals and meals for the community events. Footfall to the Jaywick seafront has increased by 8 times in 1 year, and we have created a better quality public realm with safe pavements, community garden and multi-purpose outdoor events and market space. Our efforts have significantly decreased the blight and stimulated a more positive identity for Jaywick Sands, with positive media coverage and the success of local businesses. We have learned valuable lessons from the challenges faced during the construction process. In response, we have established the Project Delivery Unit, staffed with specialists in surveying, building construction and relevant legal services. This unit is now poised to deliver the more substantial capital programmes that the Council has underway. I move the recommendation on page 153. Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and I don't need to ask for a seconder because I'm that person. I think it's an excellent report that we see in front of us. It's very detailed. And I think one of the things I did like about the report was that it captured both the previous administration's work up until we got in, and then our completion of the actual sunspot itself. And like you say, it's a wall ring, and hopefully we'll see a few more of them. But it does go to show that our continued commitment to the people of Jaywick. And I think there's also an important bit about lessons learned. And I think one of the things that we've learned is beware what lies beneath the ground. And I think that's been part of the problem with several of our projects. But as it stands, I'm happy to second it. So it's been moved and seconded. I'm happy to come out with questions or comments. Councillor Honeywood.
Thank you, Leader. I had a read through this, and as you rightly say, it's a project that was started by the previous administration and then completed by this administration. But to me, this report actually poses more questions than it answers. It talks about things like unagreed variations, which is on page 152. And there's also mentions of the contamination, which the contamination was brought to my attention during our administration, and yet we've had to revisit the issue again. So to me, as I said, this report does pose more questions than it answers. I think what's really needed is an investigation similar to the Spendles to look at this more closely. It's not the same. Well, I'm not at all saying that the situation is the same, but I would say it was similar. So that's just my view on it.
Thank you, Councillor Honeywood. And yes, whilst I know it's the same report as you, I don't think it warrants an investigation. I'm happy for you to pick it up under your scrutiny role, and that'd be the proper and right place for it to go. And you can make your recommendations to us through that way. So rather than as opposition leader on the cabinet, Councillor Henderson.
Just because, as you rightly say, that was under the previous administration, and the report obviously shows the differences in costs that were accumulated during that time. And as I said in my report, we've certainly learned, and you'll see on page 169 onwards, the lessons learned and the achievements which have been gained from that, the Sunspot being in operation, the amount of jobs that has created. 9 residents are now taking advantage of their businesses in that setup. But you will know, probably being the portfolio holder at that time, that at that time we signed a fixed price contract, and that included dealing with the contamination, because the economic situation at that time was so unstable, really. So at that time, it would have been the right thing to do. But if you hadn't have done that, you'd have possibly met it on the other end from the contractor, adding those costs on as well. So there is a discussion to have, and I think there's some good explanations as to why decisions were made at that time. But at the end of the day, I think we should be more celebrating the success, overall success, and I all do credit to the previous administration for pushing this forward. We're actually seeing those huge benefits, and the benefits to Jaywick and the benefits to those businesses that are also some of those businesses exporting. And again, if you see the positive side of that report, that all objectives have been met. They were met in 1 year. So that's a really good, and all credit again to our officers who have worked so hard to make sure that those premises, those units were filled. I'm told the retail outlets, there's been no change since that place opened. So that shows the confidence within the area. And like I said, that's something that the council, yes, there are questions. Yes, things possibly could have been done differently. But again, go back to those pages and see the lessons learned. We are certainly making sure that we cover our backs for the future.
I'm going to let Councillor Honeywood come back.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, as the project progressed, there were people who had doubts that we were were doing the right thing, and that's not on political lines. I think there were doubts in different places. So it was the right thing to do to keep going. It was the right thing to do to complete the project, and it's delivered what it set out to deliver. So I wasn't trying to be negative on the project as in what we've achieved as a council. I'm just concerned that when another project comes along, we don't make the same hiccups as previously. So that's why I thought it needed to be looked at a little bit more closely to make sure that in the future those little problems don't happen again.
Councillor Henderson.
And again, if you look at lessons learned, it talks about groundwork being a foremost contractual initial contract to start with, to make sure that though we don't come unstuck again and have these unforeseen costs, if you like, happen at all. I've got to say the team that I'm working with at the moment and the cabinet I work with are a really, really good professional team, and they are making sure that we all our risks are dealt with at an early stage. So hopefully that will give you the confidence that things have moved on and we are looking at things in a different way.
I'm going to let Mr. Davidson come in.
Can I just pick up another point Councillor Honeywood made, and you responded to, Leader, about the question around doing a investigation like Spendles? No, I don't think it's that. But if you do look at in the report on page 157, we have said that we're going to do a post-project review. Terminology of whatever a review is a review, because we do want to pick up the learning from this and any other project. And that is so important because we are now doing £60 million of projects on the Levelling Up, and therefore, whether it be from this, whether it be from other projects, making sure that actually we do know and understand that. So, as per the report on page 157, we've actually said in here the post-project review undertaken by the serve and delivery aspects of the project will, with the identified learning, will be noted. We'll look at those. The other thing which we've also said is that we will, and when I went to audit committee, said that is would also be going to those will be part of the learning which will go to audit committee as well.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Leader. Just wanted to add my thoughts on this project, which is a brilliant project. I'm fully supportive of anything that supports our local businesses and creates jobs, which will be under pressure moving forward. But yeah, very, very supportive. My question is regarding the contamination. Do we know, is the contamination site specific, or is this contamination, you know, in a wider area across the Jaywick area? And are our environmental officers aware of what the challenges may be should there be any developments in that area carried out in the future?
I'll let Mr. Davidson answer that.
I can't answer you specifically around the environment. What I was going to make some more general comment is that whenever you do that sort of work and you start digging up land, you don't know what's going to be underneath it until you start digging it up. And even where you think it's a greenfield site, actually you can find that going back many years there can be things under there which somebody's dumped or you don't know. So you know, you cannot categorically say in any site there's not going to be something under there. I'll give you another example. It was when we did the old was Starlings before it became Orwell Place. There was tanks underneath there, which when we went down there, we found that there were tanks and they still had fuel in them. So they were obviously had to be emptied and removed before and cleaned. So my point is you don't know what's going to be there, so you can't categorically say on any site anywhere until you've done that work. I would say that in terms of the work which we will do in future sites, you can do tests within there, but even that, as we know, can be other parts of the site, and so therefore, unless you do a complete test, which obviously has a cost implication, so it's not an easy question just to simply say, oh no, there'll be nothing ever again, because you don't know that.
Councillor Henderson.
And the last word on it is, don't for any moment think that all of these costs haven't been challenged, because all of the costs of the contamination and the removal of that contamination, all of the costs associated with that. We've had professionals going through that and making sure that, that those costs have been met, you know, and been dealt with in the proper way.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Leader. I accept everything that the Chief Executive has said there. However, we will have a view, our officers will have a view, our environmental officers surely have a view as to what contamination was on that site. And, you know, local residents that are living adjacent to that site or nearby, you know, may have some concerns as to what that contamination was. You know, so I think that from a reassurance point of view, you know, certainly I think that the local ward councillors should be aware, so that if they ever have any challenges that they may be aware. But you know, do our officers, are they aware, or is this a bigger problem potentially, or is this something that's leached in over many years and it possibly could be wider, or we just don't know?
Mr. Davis.
We have to be careful about not starting things by saying those sorts of things when there's absolutely no evidence of that, to starting a rumour mill and creating concerns where there aren't any. We have done the work, and we have capped it, and we've done it safely. We have got no evidence to say that there is broad contamination across a wider site. One of the key points of where that was, of course, was the market, which was concreted over. If you go just further in and behind that, that's is marshy and is wet, and you wouldn't be putting anything on there because it will is obviously well, those who obviously know the history. In 1953, the flooding came round the back and came forward, and that was where it was wet. But the sunspot and what was on there for, of course, was knocked down. That was then a redundant site, and that's the site which obviously has been redeveloped.
One more point, if I may, Leader.
It's all right. I'm going to say something as well. It's just along contamination. I'll let you come in, but you know, contaminations. We always go to the darkest place when the word contamination comes up. But to give you an idea of a contamination that we have along the seafront, is when the sand blows off the beach onto the promenade. Immediately it touches the promenade, it becomes contaminated. You know, and therefore we have to sweep it off, go off and clean it and everything else before we can put it back on the beach, which has all the same inklings as when you have on the promenade. So, like the Chief Exec, you've got to be careful when you're using the word contamination. What I will do for you, Councillor Harris, is I will speak to the Director of Environmental. If there is anything that's concerned, we operate an open and transparent administration. We're happy to share that, and I'll come back to you. But you wanted to...
Thank you. I was just going to say I was waiting for the information. You know, Chief Executive said there is no evidence to suggest that there is any wider contamination. That's what I was waiting to hear. So we have no evidence on that. There is nothing potentially to worry about. And in terms of, I take your point about what is contamination. Is it something serious? Is it not? Reassurance that it's not is what I'm looking for. But it did cost over $750,000 to sort the issue out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Henderson, seconded by myself. There are no other further comments or questions. Are we happy to move the recommendation on page 153? Thank you very much. Moving on to number 13, and this is the report of the Housing and Planning Portfolio Holder, and this is the homelessness in Tendringham. Over to you, Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Leader. I bring forward to Cabinet at its request a comprehensive report on the current levels and causes of homelessness, including the numbers coming forward, placed into temporary accommodation, and how pressures are continuing to grow, and it shows the actions being put in place to alleviate those pressures. I'm sure that I do not have to remind my colleagues on Cabinet or other members of this Council of the national picture surrounding homelessness, with all other councils in a similar position of seeing more and more people and households presenting as homeless and asking for assistance from them. Due to the increasing number of persons presenting as homeless, the Council's Housing Solution Service is being impacted to an extent on their ability to discharge the Council's statutory duties effectively and efficiently. I do not intend to go through the duties of the Council, the duties the Council owe to those presenting as homeless. They're shown in the report, but I would encourage all to read them more than once to show that what we as a Council have to do. From the report, Leader, you will see that the Council has seen an 87% increase in homelessness approaches between 2018-19 and 23-24, and a 26% increase in homelessness applications during the same period. The top 5 causes of homelessness have remained virtually the same during this time and include the loss of an assured short-hold tenancy in the private rented sector, relationship breakdown, eviction by family, domestic abuse and eviction by friends, although not necessarily in that order. There has been a 77% increase in the number of households being placed in temporary accommodation between the same dates, same years, and expenditure by the Council on temporary accommodation in the first 9 months of 24-25 was £2.1 million. The government grant in that year was just over £1 million. Expenditure on rent deposits in the same period was just short of £165,000, and a further just short of £154,000 was spent on rent in advance payments, all of which were paid to assist those faced with homelessness into settled accommodation. I'm still awaiting the final figures for the financial year 24-25, but the total figure could potentially be over £3 million. Just to give some more recent figures, Leader, this week I was informed that in the final quarter of 24-25, so January to March of this year, there were 618 approaches to the Council, an increase of 109 from the previous quarter, which equates to 21.5%. The cost of responding to homelessness is presenting a significant resource and financial challenge for most local authorities nationally, and is of such significance that it is now one of the highest risk factors in terms of the wider financial sustainability of councils. Although financial support from the government is welcomed, it falls significantly short of the associated costs. It is therefore proposed that a homelessness and temporary accommodation working group be established, chaired by myself as the portfolio holder responsible for housing planning, to support the Council in exploring and identifying measures aimed at relieving the pressure on the service. Membership of this group will be predominantly officers. Although there will be various options explored, the following measures have already been identified and will be focused on the potential to increase income streams, reducing the use of temporary accommodation through earlier prevention measures, ensuring the quality of the temporary accommodation offered, and increasing the availability of accommodation in the private rented sector. Now, before I go to the recommendations, Leader, I'd like to express my grateful thanks on behalf of this Cabinet to all of our officers who deal with those presenting as homeless or potentially about to become homeless on a day-to-day basis. They do an absolutely fantastic job and are a credit to not only this Council but to themselves, and we should all be very proud of the work they do. The recommendations are shown at the bottom of page 176, and I commend them to Cabinet. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Have you got a seconder? Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Leader. I'll be seconding this excellent report, and the work our housing department does really well on homelessness across our district. I welcome the recommendations on page 176 to improve the lives of people in tendering and reducing homelessness. So I welcome this report and echo that Councillor Baker's comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. And have I got any questions or comments? No surprise, Councillor Honeywood.
Thank you, Leader. Well, the first question I'd noted down has now been answered. When I read the report about the working group, I wondered whether it was an officer or member working group, and obviously you've said it's a officers working group. That's your decision to make. One of the points that you raise of concern, 176, is increasing the availability of accommodation in the private rented sector. Now, you may recall at a previous Cabinet meeting I raised my concerns around another council placing their residents here, and between January and June 2004 they'd made 72 placements, and obviously at Cabinet you said that you were unaware of this. But then it was raised at scrutiny on the 13th of January when I asked about this again, and you said it was an operational matter. So I then asked the question, how many had been placed here between July and December 2024? and the Cabinet member said that he would reply in writing to that. As I said, that was on the 13th of January. I've still not had an answer to that offer of a reply. During that scrutiny session, the Cabinet member said that the current numbers being placed here are not unreasonable or excessive. Now, we're reading in the report that one of the concerns is, on that page, to increase the availability of accommodation in the private rented sector. Now, I've said before, and I'm happy to say again, I think other councils placing residents here doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the residents that are placed here away from friends, family, or any support services they may have. And I think we should be taking action to deter that. So that's just my views on it. And obviously, hopefully I can have a response to the kind offer of providing me with the information on July to December.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baker.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Honeywood. I actually, and my apologies, I actually forwarded it via Democratic Services on the 3rd of February. And if you'll indulge me, Leader, I will read out my response and I will forward this to you after Cabinet. In the first 6 months of 2024, January to June, Colchester City Council, which is the 72 placements you raised, a total of 72 placements from 66 households in the tendering district area. And the other question was, how many have been placed in the district within the last 6 months, July to December 24? And I've answered in total, the number of placements made to properties in the tendering area was 88 in total. 80 of those were from other council areas in Essex, 6 were from London boroughs and 2 were from other areas. Against that, for the final quarters of 2023-24 and the first 3 quarters of 24-25, which covers the calendar year of 2024, the following occurred, and this is my adding up, so if it's slightly incorrect, that's my fault. 2,163 households approached tendering for help with homelessness, and of those, 656 were placed in temporary accommodation, with 563 of those 656 placed into settled accommodation, either being in the private sector or some in their own stock. So I hope that provides some clarity about that. With regard to my comments about increasing the availability of accommodation in the private sector or the private rented sector, we're all well aware that landlords are withdrawing from it for whatever reason. They want to sell them off and everything else. So there may be properties out there that aren't available for rent yet, and that's what I want to try and encourage. We have a number of empty homes across the district, which I find personally atrocious, that somebody can just let a house sit there, pay the excess council tax, and it's unavailable. Recently, I was informed of a 4-bedroom house in Holland-on-Sea. We have a shortage of 4-bedroom houses. I've asked officers to explore, going forward, that we speak to these people and say, would you like to rent your house to tendering district council? Because it's atrocious. It's ridiculous. How many houses we have empty across the district is just wrong. We should be able to use those. So that's something that will be one of the thoughts that I will ask officers to explore. I think that covers both questions. If it doesn't, I apologise.
That's absolutely fine. As I say, I don't appear to have received that response. That'd be great if you could forward it on. If it has disappeared into the ether somewhere, I can only apologise for raising it. But as I say, I haven't seen it, so it'd be great to see that. Thank you.
I must admit, of all the portfolio holders you could have picked on, Councillor Baker is very hot on his emails, so I was surprised when you said he hadn't received it. Councillor Harris.
Leader. Yeah, this is obviously concerning with the amount of money that we're spending, the amount of people that are facing homelessness. And I remember well the overview and scrutiny committee when we discussed this topic. With the increasing numbers of homelessness, and the direct correlation, which was agreed by officers, between joblessness and homelessness, and with joblessness, increasing, and it will increase over the months as as businesses start to lay off people because of extra costs that they've got to bear. Then we're going to expect more homelessness. The question really is to Cabinet is, do we have enough resource officers to actually deal with these inquiries on a timely manner? In terms of, there are specific questions. I'm not sure if now's the right time to bring it to the attention of Cabinet, but there are a number of concerns, which is the way that the private sector is dealt with, which is perhaps why some of them are pulling out, because one of the intentions, all good intentions, but it has consequences, is to keep people in the rented accommodation that they currently have. Although they're being evicted, let's say, the recommendation from officers is stay put, stay there, and let the process take place where the private landlord has to go through court proceedings to actually remove the person. And that's purely because they do that, which is obviously to the business owner is a massive problem and extra costs, etc. But they're having to do that because there's this pipeline of homelessness that's coming through all of the time, and because we don't have the resource to deal with it and also the accommodation to put them in, it's a real conundrum and a real problem. It's a serious issue for everyone concerned, and our officers do a fantastic job. They have a very difficult job to do, so there's lots of things to consider there, but I think the resource is the main issue.
Okay, homelessness is a problem nationwide. I think we know that. It's something that's been going for quite some time, well before this administration came into place. And I think that's one of the reasons why Spendles is so important to us, to get it done and over the line. And as Councillor Baker said, there's a working group, and the idea of that working group is to address all the problems, including resourcing, which I don't believe is an issue because it's not been raised as a cost pressure in any other way. So, but maybe you're right, in the future there may be more, and we'll see where that goes. But I'd also take the opportunity to thank the officers for the excellent work that they do, and it's hard work, and it's not something I'd want to do, and having to deal with one or two as a councillor is quite heartbreaking sometimes, and these people do it day in, day out, and I think it's a hats off to them for some of the heartbreaking work they do, and how they actually, as Councillor Baker said, they've actually managed to resolve quite a few of those issues and help people back into permanent accommodation. But I can feel Mr. Davidson. So,
well, part of what I was just going to say, you've stolen from me, which is an unusual one, because it is meeting with the team, talking with the team, Kathy who leads the team. It is a very, very difficult job, and day in, day out, it is absolutely heartbreaking. My hat goes off to them every single time I hear them talk about the families which they talk about. I'm going to come on just to actually answer your question in addition to what the Cabinet have said as well in a moment. And the other thing is, I think that part of the problem is because it's a completely demand-led service. So we don't have actually we're only going to deal with 20 this week and only going to deal with 20. If somebody comes knocking on that door at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, as they did only last week, we obviously have to respond, and we do have out of hours, which we do. The demand led is part of the issue. Of course, you never know when that demand's going up. The one thing we do know nationally, both for tendering but also nationally, is the demand is going up. And so what we're going to need tomorrow, next week, we continually keep under review, because that demand, if you look at the figures back in 15 years ago when I came here, it is a very different scenario to now. So you're right around have we got enough resources? We need to keep reviewing that, simply because the demand continues to grow, and that is why we're also doing things like prevention. So to the team going out negotiating with building societies where perhaps somebody's going to be made repossessed and therefore made homeless, landlords, discussing it with them, and actually, what is it we can do? It's cheaper for us sometimes to give support rather than obviously have to take in the cost of temporary accommodation. So it's a very complex jigsaw, if you like, around how all of these different aspects. My worry is it started out as a 20-piece jigsaw. It's now a 1,000-piece jigsaw and growing.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Leader. Mr. Davidson's nicked a bit of what I was going to say, but that's not surprising. It's not unusual. When I started in this portfolio, I had no idea about homelessness or housing, no idea at all. And it's been a very sharp learning curve. And I've said what I've said about officers because I speak to them on a regular basis. And I speak to the corporate director weekly. And it is heartbreaking. It really is. And I'll be quite open about this. It's given me sleepless nights, especially when it's like, sorry, how much are we spending? Knowing that we have a limited budget. Yes, we get government support. Please, can you give us some more? Because it would be great. But as I said at scrutiny, I think in January, about some of the reasons for homelessness, and I had a look, so I get spreadsheets galore, and I'm quite interested in figures, is that last year of the people that were placed into temporary accommodation, 160 of the figure, which was probably the highest figure, was due to family and friend eviction. It wasn't landlords and tenants. Landlords came in at 60. Domestic abuse came in at 40 something. So even if you add those two together, it didn't match up with family and friends. So some of the work that officers don't necessarily have the time to do because they're, and I've used the word firefighting, and that's what it is. It's sort of dealing with the problem. I'd encourage people, if they're going to be becoming homeless, is approach us a lot sooner, because we can then help in a much better way, in my view. I think I'll leave it there. I could bore you for hours, and I don't intend to. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to, but like I say, I'm looking forward to the working group. I think one of the focuses is about prevention, isn't it? That's one of the biggest things, rather than letting things get to a really bad position before we come to the council. How do we help and step in and make sure that people are okay and what is their own accommodation and they're happy with before things become a problem? But I think there's no more questions or comments. So it's been moved by Councillor Baker, seconded by Councillor Scott. Are we happy to move the recommendation on page 170? Thank you very much. Okay, the last agenda item, no it isn't, it's penultimate agenda item, number 14 is the report of the housing portfolio holder. This is you, Councillor Baker, again, and this is the consideration and adoption of a revised housing under occupation transfer incentive policy and a new housing compensation policy. Over to you.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to be able to recommend a further 2 housing policies to Cabinet for approval. These being, as the Leader just described, the Housing Under Occupation Transfer Incentive Policy and the Housing Compensation Policy. Both policies formalise work already been undertaken within the housing service. It's recognised that there's an existing demand for family-sized properties from those on the Council's housing register. Therefore, it's essential that we do all we can to support those tenants who wish to downsize or resize from family-sized accommodation, and in order to maximise the use of our housing stock. This policy sets out how the Council will encourage and assist tenants who are under occupying family or adapted accommodation to move to other smaller accommodation, thereby releasing the former to others who are in housing need. The Housing Compensation Policy sets out the approach that the Council will take in response to requests for compensation to ensure it acts in a fair, consistent and transparent manner. And whilst this Council is fully committed to providing excellent housing service, it accepts that there will be occasions when we do not meet the high standards and tenants are inconvenienced or suffer a financial loss as a result. Where a complaint is considered justified, sometimes an acknowledgement and apology may be all that is required. However, where a complainant has suffered some disadvantage, inconvenience or loss as a result of the service failure experienced, other remedial action may need to be considered, including financial compensation. And as I've said on numerous occasions previously, these policies comply with the Regulator of Social Housing's revised consumer standards that came into effect last April, as well as the Housing Ombudsman's guidance in relation to compensation. The recommendations, Leader, are shown on page 195 and 196, and I commend them to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baker, do you have a seconder? Councillor Scott.
Yes, Chairman. I second this report. It's well written, and I'm forced to endorse what the comments from Councillor Baker. Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Do we have any comments or questions? Okay, in that case, it's been moved by Councillor Baker, seconded by Councillor Scott. Are we happy to agree the recommendations of 195 to 196? Thank you very much. Which brings us to the last item, which is management item team items, and there are none on this occasion. So the next meeting is going to be held on Friday the 9th of May, and I hereby close the meeting. Thank you very much.